Approaches 7 o'clock. Tonight's news from ITN is presented by Peter Sissons with Anne Perkins.
After the shooting, which left 3 gunmen dead, questions and some answers as the army claim one was a top IRA commander. Hello, good evening. 3 IRA men lie dead and the details begin to come out about their murder mission that the army ambushed. 2 suspected IRA terrorists are held in West Germany and 2 civilians die in Londonderry, victims of a booby trap meant for the police. 24 hours in which the tempo of the Irish conflict is undiminished. Tonight we report from Northern Ireland and have reaction from the south. Desmond O'Malley, former Justice Minister, is in our Dublin studio. The other headlines: a plane crash in the United States, a number dead, but many may have survived. A moment to relish for Lech Wałęsa. The Polish government eat their words and call him in for talks. And the postal workers have their strike and the mail piles up. The employers say it's not 100%. Also tonight, a special report on a startling epidemic that is leading to the slaughter of hundreds of cows every month. Bad in itself, but with a potentially serious aspect for the public. Could this disease of the animal brain be relayed to and kill humans too? But first, the RUC says one of the IRA's top commanders was among the 3 men killed by the security forces in yesterday's shootings in County Tyrone. They describe him as a ruthless, dedicated terrorist. The IRA says the 3 men were on what they called active service. 29-year-old Michael Gerard Hart is said to have been the commanding officer of the IRA in mid-Tyrone. Hart first came to the security service's attention as an IRA member in the late 1970s. He quickly rose through the ranks to become what's described as an activist and an organizer involved in numerous IRA operations since 1983. The RUC say the other 2 men, Hart's brother Martin and Brian Mullen, were also members of the IRA. They'd been arrested and questioned a number of times, but never charged. Meanwhile, in West Germany, 2 suspected IRA members have been arrested near a British Army barracks. It's reported they had guns and ammunition in their car when they were stopped close to the Dutch border. And in Londonderry, 2 elderly civilians were killed, victims of an IRA booby trap bomb. Michael Crick reports from Northern Ireland on the day's events.
It was an IRA booby trap that went badly wrong. 2 elderly neighbours had broken into the flat, having not seen the owners for several days. The owners had in fact been kidnapped by the IRA, and the IRA had set up a bomb in the flat, which was designed to go off when the security forces came along to investigate what had happened to the owners.
The people from the area lifted their rubble from the middle of the floor, and there was a body lying there.
Was he obviously dead?
He was obviously dead at that stage. By the time the ambulance service got here, it was people who had first aid just stated that he was dead.
Instead of soldiers or police, the victims were a widow and widower. The IRA apologised, saying it went tragically wrong. Meanwhile, the area around Drumnakilly, where the army shot 3 IRA men dead yesterday, is still cordoned off. And contrary to several reports, it may not have been the SAS that did yesterday's operation, but possibly a similar army undercover unit, which has been operating for several weeks now. This afternoon at Knock Police Station, the RUC displayed 2 AK-47 rifles and 1 Webley pistol, which they said that they had recovered from the White Sierra, which it appears the dead men had hijacked just before they were shot. But exactly what happened yesterday is still not clear. One anonymous witness told Robert Hall of ITN how earlier yesterday afternoon he had come across a family in the village who'd been held hostage by what appears to have been the same gang.
Did they say what had happened?
Said that just after they finished their dinner, the IRA had come into the house, 2 in the front door and 1 in the back, and told them that they were going to hold them hostage for 2 hours and they were going to take their car. Must have had a job to carry out. And they put them all in one bedroom and said, don't come out.
Police say one of the dead men, Michael Gerard Hart, had been questioned in Gough Barracks over the weekend in connection with the Omagh bomb and released on Monday. But were the dead men among those mentioned by MP Ken McGuinness to the Prime Minister 10 days ago?
I think it's quite possible from memory. And as I said, I didn't have a list. It's quite possible that some of those people would have been among the names because they were very well-known members of the IRA unit in that area.
The deaths of the 3 IRA men here seem unlikely to generate the kind of controversy that we saw with the killings in Gibraltar last March. For unlike Gibraltar, it seems that these 3 men were armed, that they'd hijacked 2 cars and had held several people hostage. But it's still not clear whether any attempt was made to arrest them or who fired first. Yesterday's incident seems similar in some ways to the attack at Loch Gall last year, when 8 IRA men were shot dead. The rules about when soldiers can shoot are governed by what's called the yellow card.
It says, among other things, that the soldier should only use the minimum force necessary in a particular situation. They should only fire aimed shots. They should use the minimum number of rounds of ammunition necessary, and finally, I think it also says that they should give warning wherever possible.
Are there any circumstances where you don't have to give a warning?
Yes, there are. Firstly, if you're being attacked, if you're in a situation where you're being fired upon, you can return fire to people firing against you, and also fire on people who you think are about to use firearms against you, firearms meaning guns as well as bombs. Secondly, you can use firearms without warning in circumstances where the delay by giving the warning might put yourself or innocent bystanders in danger.
At the homes of Republican sympathisers in the area around Drumnakilly today, black flags were out. And there were Irish tricolours at half-mast. But the question is, how will Northern Ireland's Catholic community as a whole react?
The question still remains and must be asked, and I believe it must be answered. Was any attempt made to use minimum force to apprehend these people in such a way that it would not have caused danger to the lives of the soldiers involved? Because that surely is the root of the problem, and that question must be answered. I think we must also know, did the police know about this incident? Were they present? And if they didn't know, and if they were not present, then it raises serious questions about the primacy of the police in the north of Ireland.
Legally, what happens now over the Drumnakilly deaths? Will there be an inquest or an inquiry?
Well, there are really 2 parallel procedures. The police will investigate the incident in the same way that they would investigate any violent or suspicious death. They will make a report to the Chief Constable, who will basically refer that report to the Director of Public Prosecutions, who will decide whether anyone should be charged in connection with it. The parallel process is through the Coroner's Court, and that will in fact be postponed for a very long time. Is what the coroner is required to hold an inquest into a suspicious death as soon as practical, but it will be put off if there is a police investigation continuing. And in the context of Northern Ireland, what has happened is that inquests have been put off for periods of years, in effect.
As part of their clearing up, the police removed the dead men's hijacked car from Drumnakilly this afternoon. But it may be some time before this incident is cleared up politically. Michael Crick, ITN, Northern Ireland.
Here, the Labour Party has called for a full public statement on the circumstances surrounding yesterday's shootings. In a letter to the Northern Ireland Secretary Tom King, Labour spokesman Jim Marshall has asked for an assurance that there will be an unhindered investigation into the incident by the Royal Ulster Constabulary's CID branch. Mr Marshall wants to know whether or not the SAS was involved in the shooting, and if so, whether this was a change of government policy following Mr King's meetings with the Prime Minister last week.
What we have to do is that we've got to ensure that the security forces operate within the rule of the law. We're there to defend the rule of law in the north of Ireland, and it's of paramount importance that any government is seen to be operating within the rule of law. And what we've got to ensure is that the events of last night are not seen in terms of a revenge killing.
Is it your concern now that a shoot-to-kill policy in fact exists?
And rumours are already spreading in the north of Ireland that last night did illustrate a shoot-to-kill policy. Our view is that such a policy doesn't exist, but we think the Secretary of State can kill those rumours by answering the specific questions that we've asked and giving a full disclosure of all the information.
In your view, what role should the SAS be playing?
That is not for me to say, but if they do operate within Northern Ireland, then they've got to operate within the rules as laid down. That means respecting the law and using minimum force if force has to be used.
Well, joining us now from Dublin is the leader of Ireland's Progressive Democratic Party, Desmond O'Malley, who's a former Justice Minister. Mr O'Malley, do you have any reservations about British troops ambushing the IRA when they're out on a murder mission?
Not if it's clearly within the law. I would hope that they would not resort to a shoot-to-kill policy at all, shoot-to-kill at all costs, that they would remain within the law. If they do, obviously, they have a duty to enforce the law. They have a very primitive enemy, and they have to act toughly. But even that does not allow them to go beyond the law, and I hope that the incident in Tyrone yesterday did not go beyond the law. I don't think that we know enough about it to say whether it did or not at the moment, one way or the other.
After the County Tyrone bus bombing, in which 8 British soldiers died, would you expect now the Irish government to support a new British offensive, including actions of this type, against the IRA?
Yes, I think the Irish government will support any actions within the law, but the Irish government would be anxious, as would all political parties in the Republic, to ensure that they did not go beyond the law. And an example of that, as we would see it, is what happened in Gibraltar, because that actually was a godsend to the Provisional IRA. It helped them in recruitment. It won sympathy from them, from people who perhaps don't think too deeply about these things and can become a bit emotional about it. It is very important that the forces of law and order of any democratic country would ensure that they would not reduce themselves to the level of the terrorists against whom they're fighting, even though the temptation for the men on the ground at times must be very great.
Aren't they, in a sense, when politicians, including yourself, no doubt, constantly describe the IRA as the most ruthless and depraved killers, aren't they, in a sense, outlaws? Do they deserve any protection from the law?
It is not an outright war, and they're human beings. In that sense, I think that a democratic country fighting an internal terrorist problem of this kind and not fighting a normal, legitimate, declared war has to remain within the terms of its own law. I don't think that you can equate it with terrorists who are, as it were, invading you from a foreign country or something of that kind, where you could declare war on them in a formal way. In fact, you would only glorify the IRA by seeking to declare war on them, because they try to describe this in their simplistic way as a war between Britain and Ireland, which most assuredly it is not.
In your judgment, can military action alone crush the IRA?
No, it certainly can't, and I would have thought that that would be clear to everyone by now. And the difficulty, as I would see it, is that when some awful atrocity happens, such as the awful atrocity in County Tyrone last week, when 8 soldiers, unfortunately, were brutally murdered, Northern Ireland suddenly again goes on the screens or the headlines of the media in Britain. It becomes a problem for the British government. I think that the British government should think in longer-term political terms rather than simply in terms of having to react to some awful atrocity.
You say it's a problem for the British government, but the IRA are dedicated to the overthrow of the Irish government too.
They are, undoubtedly. They have almost equal antipathy with the Irish government, but they haven't pursued their activities to anything like the same extent south of the border. But it is, of course, a problem for both governments. And I would like to see both of them look at the matter in a political context with a view to trying to achieve a long-term political solution that will remove whatever raison d'etre the IRA are able to claim in the eyes of foolish people that they have at the present time.
Desmond O'Malley, thank you.